The alarm bells rang through the ship as Captain Jake Morrison rushed to the bridge. His crew was already at their stations, faces tight with concern. The year was 2157, and humanity had been traveling between the stars for only 20 years. Every new signal could mean danger or discovery. "What do we have, Rick?" Morrison asked his second-in-command, Commander Rick Torres. "Unknown vessel, sir. About 2 million miles away near the third planet. The signal is weak, but definitely artificial." Torres pulled up the data on the main screen. "It's not like anything we've seen before." Dr. Lisa Hayes looked up from her science station. As the ship's chief scientist and diplomat, she had studied every known form of communication. "Captain, I'm picking up what might be a distress call. The pattern repeats every 30 seconds. Morrison stared at the screen. Earth. Command had sent the UES Meridian to explore this system, but they had strict orders about contact with unknown life forms. They were supposed to observe and report back, nothing more. But if someone was in trouble... "Amy, can you get us closer without being detected?" he asked his chief engineer. Amy Walsh's fingers flew over her controls. "I can mask our engine signature, but if they have good sensors, they'll spot us anyway." Morrison made his choice. "Take us in, slow and careful." As they moved closer, the ship on their screen became clearer. It was unlike anything they had ever seen. The hull seemed to be made of some kind of crystal that caught and reflected light in beautiful patterns. Parts of it were clearly damaged, with dark cracks running through the crystal walls. "Life signs," Dr. Hayes reported, her voice excited. "Definitely alive, but the readings are strange. I've never seen biological patterns like this." Through the ship's windows, they could see movement inside the alien vessel. The beings inside were tall and seemed to shimmer like their ship. They moved in ways that looked almost like dancing. "They're trying to repair something," Amy observed, "but it's not working. Their power is failing." Morrison felt his chest tighten. These beings, whatever they were, needed help. But making contact would change everything. Humanity would no longer be alone in the universe. "Sir," Torres said quietly, "if we make contact without permission from Earth Command..." "I know the rules, Rick." Morrison looked at his crew. These people trusted him to make the right choice. "But I also know what's right. Lisa, can you try to communicate with them?" Dr. Hayes was already working. "I'll try basic mathematical sequences first, then move to audio patterns." She adjusted her equipment and sent out a simple signal. 1 + 1 = 2. 2 + 2 = 4. They waited. Minutes passed with no response. Then suddenly the alien ship began to glow brighter. Patterns of light moved across its surface like waves. "They're responding," Hayes said. "But not with mathematics. They're using sound frequencies. It's like music." The bridge filled with the most beautiful sound any of them had ever heard. It was like singing, but deeper and more complex than any human voice. The melody rose and fell, and somehow, even though they didn't understand the words, they could feel the meaning. The aliens were asking who they were. Hayes worked quickly to modify their communication system. "I think I can respond using similar tones." She created a simple melody that conveyed peaceful intentions. The response was immediate. The alien ship's lights pulsed in what looked like joy. More complex melodies filled the space between the two ships. Hayes worked to decode them while Amy prepared the docking systems. "They want to come aboard," Hayes translated. "They're grateful for our response. I think they've been alone for a long time, too." Morrison nodded. "Bring them over. Full diplomatic protocols." The first alien to step aboard the Meridian was unlike anything they had imagined. It stood 7 feet tall, its body made of what looked like living crystal. Different colors flowed through its transparent form like slow lightning. When it moved, it made soft musical sounds. Dr. Hayes stepped forward and played a welcoming melody through the ship's speakers. The alien's crystal body glowed brighter, and it responded with its own song. Somehow the meaning was clear. This being was grateful and peaceful. Over the next few hours, Hayes worked with the alien, who they learned was called Zeth Ara, to build a better communication system. The aliens called themselves the Villani, and they were explorers like humans. Their ship had been damaged while studying a nearby star system. "They're scientists," Hayes explained to Morrison. "They travel between worlds to learn about the universe. Just like us." Zethara's song became sad as it explained what had happened. Raiders had attacked their ship while they were collecting samples from an asteroid field. The Villani were peaceful people with no weapons, so they could only run. But the damage was too severe, and they had been drifting for weeks. Morrison felt anger rise in his chest. Someone had attacked these peaceful beings just because they could. "Tell them we'll help repair their ship," he told Hayes. Amy worked with the Villani engineers whose crystal-based technology was far different from human systems, but surprisingly compatible. The Villani showed her how their ships grew rather than being built, using special crystals that could heal themselves when provided with the right energy. In return, Amy shared human engineering principles. The Villani were amazed by human creativity in solving problems with limited resources. Where they would grow a new crystal component, humans would find ways to make old parts work better. As the repairs continued, Morrison made another decision that would anger Earth Command. "We're going to escort them home," he announced. "Make sure they get there safely." The journey to the Villani home system took 2 weeks. During that time, the two crews became friends. Dr. Hayes and Zethara spent hours sharing information about their respective species. The Villani had been traveling space for over 1,000 years, but they had never met another intelligent species. "We began to think we were alone," Zethara sang through the translation system Hayes had built. "Finding you gives us hope that the universe is full of friends we haven't met yet." When they reached Velthara, the Villani homeworld, Morrison and his crew were amazed. The entire planet seemed to be made of crystal cities that sang in harmony with the wind. The cities were built into mountains and grew up from the ground like massive geodes. The Villani welcomed the humans as honored guests. Morrison's crew was the first from another species to ever visit their world. Thousands of Villani gathered to see them, their crystal bodies creating light shows as they communicated their excitement. Elder Serenthi, the leader of the Villani, sang a song of gratitude that made several of the human crew cry with its beauty. Through Hayes' translation, the elder explained that the Villani had always believed that intelligence was precious and rare. Meeting humans proved that the universe was richer than they had dared to hope. Morrison and Elder Serenthi signed the first treaty between humans and an alien species. The Human-Villani Friendship Accord promised cooperation, mutual aid, and the sharing of knowledge for peaceful purposes. As they prepared to return to Earth, Zethara gave Dr. Hayes a small crystal that glowed with soft blue light. "This will let you call us across any distance," the alien explained. "We are friends now. Friends help each other." Morrison looked out at the crystal cities of Velthara and knew that humanity was no longer alone in the universe. They had found their first friends among the stars, and he would do anything to protect that friendship. The return journey to Earth was filled with excitement and worry. They had made history, but they had also disobeyed direct orders. Morrison hoped that when Earth Command saw what they had accomplished, they would understand that some rules were worth breaking for the right reasons. Little did they know that their new friendship would soon be tested in ways none of them could imagine. 6 months had passed since Captain Jake Morrison and his crew returned to Earth with news of the Villani. The reaction from Earth Command was mixed. Some officials were angry about the broken orders, but most were excited about humanity's first alien friends. Dr. Lisa Hayes now worked as Earth's official ambassador to the Villani. She spent most of her time at the joint research station built near Velthara, where human and Villani scientists worked together. The cooperation was better than anyone had hoped. The Villani healing crystals had already saved thousands of human lives. Diseases that had killed people for centuries could now be cured in days. In return, human defensive technology helped protect Villani trade ships from the space pirates that sometimes attacked peaceful vessels. Morrison commanded a new ship, the UES Guardian, specifically designed for diplomatic missions. His crew included both humans and Villani working side by side. Amy Walsh had learned to speak in the musical language of the Villani, while Zethara had become fluent in human speech. Everything seemed perfect until the morning when Admiral Karen Ross called Morrison with terrible news. "Jake, we've lost contact with Research Station Alpha 7, Admiral Ross said through the video screen. Her face looked worried. It's been 3 days since their last transmission. Morrison felt his stomach drop. Alpha 7 was a joint research station where 12 humans and 8 Volani scientists studied new medical treatments. Dr. Hayes had visited there just 2 weeks ago. What was their last message? Morrison asked. Standard daily report. Everything normal. Then nothing. Ross leaned forward. I'm sending you to investigate. Take your full crew and be ready for anything. The journey to Alpha 7 took 18 hours. Morrison's ship carried both human marines and Volani defenders, though the crystal beings had little experience with violence. As they approached the station, Amy Walsh ran every scan she could. The station is still there, she reported, but I'm not picking up any life signs. The power is completely dead. Through the ship's windows, they could see that Research Station Alpha 7 was badly damaged. Parts of the station had been torn apart by weapons fire. Worse, there were no escape pods left. Everyone was either dead or taken. Morrison led the boarding party himself. The station's corridors were dark and cold. Emergency lighting cast strange shadows on the walls. Commander Rick Torres and his Marines moved carefully, checking every room. What they found made Morrison's blood run cold. The human living quarters had been searched roughly, personal items scattered everywhere. But the Volani sections were worse. The beautiful crystal gardens where the aliens meditated had been smashed. Special crystals that took years to grow were broken into pieces. Captain, Torres called from the main lab. You need to see this. The laboratory looked like a battlefield. Computer systems were destroyed, but not randomly. Someone had carefully removed specific equipment while destroying the rest. On one wall, burn marks showed where powerful weapons had been used. But the most disturbing discovery was in the security office. Amy Walsh had managed to restore power to one damaged computer. The security footage showed what had happened. The attackers were like nothing Morrison had ever seen. They were tall and powerful, with gray skin covered in metal armor. Their faces were hidden behind masks, but their movements showed they were experienced warriors. Most disturbing were the metal attachments that seemed to be built into their bodies. These weren't just soldiers wearing armor, they were part machine. Look at this part, Amy said, pointing to the screen. The footage showed the attackers using strange devices to capture the Volani scientists. Instead of stunning them unconscious, the devices seemed to drain something from the crystal beings. The Volani grew dim and weak, but remained alive. They wanted them alive, Torres observed. But why take the crystals from their bodies? The answer came from Zethara, who had been examining the broken crystal gardens. The Volani's song was filled with horror and sadness. They took the life crystals, Hayes translated. Those crystals are part of every Volani's body. Without them, my people become very sick, but they don't die quickly. Morrison felt rage building inside him. They're torturing them. But who are these attackers? The answer came when Amy managed to recover more data from the damaged computers. The attackers had tried to erase all information, but human computer systems were harder to destroy than they had expected. The station's long-range sensors recorded ships leaving the system, Amy reported. The computer automatically tried to identify them. She paused, her face pale. Captain, they're called the Korthak Empire. According to our databases, they're slave traders who attack peaceful worlds. Morrison had heard whispers about the Korthak from other spacefaring species. They were an empire built on conquest and slavery. Entire species had disappeared after Korthak raids, but they had never attacked this far into human or Volani space before. Hayes was working with the Volani survivor they had found hiding in a damaged crystal chamber. Kyrethan had been Zethara's student, a young scientist who specialized in healing crystals. The young Volani's song was weak and filled with pain. The Korthak have been watching us, Hayes translated. Kyrethan says they've been studying both humans and Volani for months. They know about our friendship and our joint research. The implications hit Morrison like a physical blow. They're not just random raiders. This was planned. Admiral Ross arrived 2 days later with a small fleet. Her investigation confirmed Morrison's fears. The Korthak had been very systematic. They had taken specific research data about human-Volani cooperation. They had captured scientists who knew the most about both species biology and technology. "It gets worse," Admiral Ross told Morrison privately. "Intelligence reports suggest the Korthak are planning something big. They see our alliance with the Volani as a threat to their expansion plans." Morrison looked out at the stars, thinking about his friends among the Volani. These peaceful beings had welcomed humanity with open hearts. Now they were paying the price for that friendship. The news got worse over the following weeks. 3. More Volani research colonies went silent. Each attack followed the same pattern. The Korthak would arrive suddenly, capture key personnel, and steal important crystals and technology. Then they would disappear before help could arrive. Zethara brought more disturbing news when Morrison met with the Volani leadership on Velthera. The crystal being's song was darker than Morrison had ever heard it. "Our deep space monitors have detected Korthak ships near human colonies," Hayes translated. "They're not just targeting us anymore, Jake. They're studying your people too." Elder Serenthi called an emergency council. For the first time in their history, the peaceful Volani were discussing war. Some believed they should hide deeper in space, abandoning their colonies to keep their people safe. Others, led by Zethara, argued that running would only delay the inevitable. "The Korthak enslave entire species," Zethara sang. "If we run, they will follow. If our human friends run, the Korthak will follow them too. We must stand together or fall separately." Morrison found himself in the middle of the debate. Earth Command wanted him to recommend whether humanity should help defend the Volani or focus on protecting human colonies. It was an impossible choice, but Morrison knew what he had to do. "We made a promise," he told Admiral Ross over the communication link. "The Friendship Accord says we'll help each other. These people trusted us, and now they're being attacked because of that trust." Ross nodded slowly. "I was hoping you'd say that, Jake. But you need to know what we're facing. Intelligence estimates the Korthak Empire has over 1,000 warships. They've conquered dozens of species. This isn't going to be easy." Morrison looked around the Crystal Council chamber where Volani and humans sat together, planning their defense. Amy Walsh was working with Volani engineers to combine their technologies. Dr. Hayes was coordinating with both species' medical teams to prepare for casualties. These weren't just allies anymore. They were friends who had become family. The Korthak had made a serious mistake. They thought they were attacking two separate species who would be easy to divide and conquer. Instead, they had attacked a family. And families protect each other no matter the cost. "Send word to Earth Command," Morrison told Admiral Ross. "Tell them we're going to need every ship they can spare. The Korthak want a war, and they're about to find out what happens when you hurt humanity's friends." As the council meeting ended, Morrison noticed something that gave him hope. The Volani were no longer singing songs of fear. Led by Zethara, they were learning human battle songs. For the first time in their peaceful history, the crystal beings were preparing to fight. The storm was coming, but they would face it together. The attack came at dawn on New Denver, humanity's newest colony world. Captain Jake Morrison was visiting the settlement when the Korthak ships appeared in the sky like dark clouds. There was no warning, no chance to prepare. The enemy had planned this perfectly. Morrison ran through the streets as explosions shook the ground. The Korthak weren't trying to destroy the colony. They were trying to capture it. Their weapons stunned people instead of killing them, and their soldiers moved quickly to round up civilians. "Amy, get the defense systems online," Morrison shouted into his communicator. His chief engineer was back at the landing pad where their ship was parked. "I'm trying, Captain." Amy Walsh's voice came through the static. "But they're jamming our signals. I can't reach the orbital defenses." Morrison watched in horror as Korthak soldiers dragged unconscious colonists toward their transport ships. These weren't just military targets. They were taking farmers, teachers, children, families who had come to New Denver to build a better life. Commander Rick Torres appeared at Morrison's side with a group of colonial Marines. "We can't fight them all, sir. There are too many. Morrison looked at the sky where more Korthak ships were landing. Each one carried dozens of soldiers in their gray armor, with metal parts built into their bodies. But Morrison also saw something else. Small bright lights moving between the enemy ships. Those are Volani fighters, he realized. Zathara kept the promise. The crystal ships of the Volani were small but fast. They darted between the larger Korthak vessels, their harmonic weapons creating beautiful but deadly music. Where the Volani songs touched the enemy ships, the metal hulls began to crack and weaken. Dr. Lisa Hayes came running up with a group of colonists. "Jake, we need to get these people to the evacuation point. The Korthak are taking prisoners, not just killing them." Morrison nodded. "That's good and bad news. Good because people might survive. Bad because we know what the Korthak do to their prisoners." As they moved through the colony, Morrison saw the real horror of the Korthak attack. The gray soldiers were using the same devices they had seen in the security footage from the research station. They were draining something from the humans they captured, leaving them weak but alive. Amy Walsh met them at the ship with terrible news. "Captain, I'm getting reports from across the galaxy. This isn't just happening here. The Korthak are attacking Crystal Mere at the same time." Morrison's blood went cold. Crystal Mere was one of the most important Volani worlds, home to millions of crystal beings. If the Korthak were attacking both species simultaneously, it meant their intelligence was even better than anyone had thought. "Can you reach Zathara?" Morrison asked. Hayes worked frantically with her communication equipment. After several minutes, she managed to connect with their Volani friend. Zathara's song came through filled with pain and determination. "The attack on Crystal Mere is massive," Hayes translated. "Hundreds of Korthak ships. The Volani are fighting, but they've never been warriors. They're learning as they go." Morrison made a quick decision. "Amy, can you get our ship to Crystal Mere?" "It'll take 6 hours at maximum speed," she replied. "But what about the people here?" Morrison looked around at the colonists they had saved. Only about 200 people out of a settlement of 3,000. The rest were either dead or captured. The weight of that failure pressed down on him, like a physical force. "We take them with us," he decided. "The Volani need our help, and these people need somewhere safe to go." The journey to Crystal Mere was the longest 6 hours of Morrison's life. Reports came in from other human colonies under attack. The Korthak were systematic and brutal, but they were also making mistakes. They had expected easy victories against two peaceful species. Instead, they faced determined resistance. When they arrived at Crystal Mere, Morrison saw a battle unlike anything in human history. The beautiful crystal cities were under siege, but they weren't falling easily. The Volani had turned their cities into fortresses, and the crystals themselves were singing defensive songs that disrupted Korthak equipment. Zathara met them at the landing pad, but Morrison barely recognized his friend. The crystal being's body was cracked and dim, showing the strain of leading the defense. But Zathara's song was stronger than ever. "We have held them for 18 hours, Hayes translated. "But they keep coming. We've never fought a war before, Jake. We don't know how." Morrison put his hand on his friend's crystal shoulder. "Then we'll learn together." The battle for Crystal Mere lasted 3 days. Morrison found himself commanding both human marines and Volani defenders, who had never held weapons before. The crystal beings were quick learners, and their natural ability to work together made them surprisingly effective soldiers. Amy Walsh worked with Volani engineers to combine their technologies in ways no one had thought possible. Human weapons, powered by Volani crystals, became incredibly powerful. Volani harmonic devices guided by human targeting systems could disable entire enemy squads, but the cost was terrible. Every hour brought new casualties. Morrison watched young Volani learn to fight and die in the same day. Human soldiers who had signed up to explore the stars found themselves in the bloodiest battle in human history. On the 3rd day, the Korthak commander made a mistake. Warlord Grakthul, leader of the attacking force, grew impatient with the resistance. He ordered his soldiers to stop taking prisoners and start killing everyone. That decision changed everything. The Villani had been fighting to protect their homes, but now they were fighting for their lives. Their songs became darker and more powerful. The crystal cities themselves began to sing, and the sound was like nothing Morrison had ever heard. The harmonic weapons of the Villani had always been defensive, designed to disable rather than destroy. But as the songs grew darker, Morrison saw Korthak soldiers collapse as their cybernetic implants overloaded. The metal parts built into their bodies became weaknesses instead of strengths. "Lisa, are you seeing this?" Morrison asked as another group of Korthak soldiers fell to the Villani war songs. Hayes was recording everything with her scientific equipment. "Jake, I think we've found their weakness. The Korthak cybernetics make them stronger, but they also make them vulnerable to specific frequencies. The revelation came too late to save Crystal Mere. Despite their brave defense, the Crystal City fell on the 4th day. The surviving Villani were forced to evacuate, leaving behind their ancient home. Among the captured was Kyrathan, the young Villani scientist who had become like a son to Zathara. Morrison stood in the ruins of the Crystal Gardens where he had first learned about Villani culture. The beautiful singing crystals were broken and silent. The cost of friendship had been higher than anyone had imagined. Admiral Karen Ross arrived with the human fleet just as the evacuation was ending. Her face was grim as she surveyed the destruction. "How many?" she asked Morrison. 2 million Villani evacuated from Crystal Mere," he replied. "But at least 3 million captured or killed. The human colonies fared better, but we still lost. Over 50,000 people." Ross nodded slowly. "The Korthak made a mistake attacking both our species at once. Earth Command has authorized full military deployment. Every ship, every soldier, every weapon we have." Morrison looked up at the stars where more human ships were arriving every hour. The largest fleet in human history was assembling, and it was being joined by every Villani vessel that could still fight. "What about the prisoners?" Morrison asked. "We can't leave them in Korthak hands." "Intelligence reports suggest they're being taken to research facilities in the Regulus sector," Ross replied. "The Korthak want to study both our species to develop biological weapons." Morrison felt anger burning in his chest. The Korthak had attacked peaceful people, destroyed homes, and captured friends. They had turned the galaxy's first interspecies friendship into a weapon against both species. But they had also made a terrible mistake. They had united two species in a way that peace alone never could have. Humans and Villani were no longer just friends. They were family, bound together by shared sacrifice and common purpose. Zathara approached Morrison and Admiral Ross. The Crystal Being's song was different now, harder and more determined than the peaceful melodies Morrison remembered. "We have learned much about war in these past days," Hayes translated. "We have learned that sometimes violence is necessary to protect peace. We have learned that friendship requires sacrifice." Morrison nodded. "And we've learned that the Korthak made a mistake. They thought they were attacking two separate species. They didn't realize they were attacking one family." As the combined human-Villani fleet prepared for the largest military operation in galactic history, Morrison thought about Kyrathan and all the other prisoners in Korthak hands. The young Villani had trusted humans to protect them, and Morrison had failed. But failure wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning of humanity's promise to bring their friends home no matter the cost. The Korthak had brought war to the galaxy. Now they were going to learn what happened when you hurt humanity's family. The largest fleet in galactic history gathered at the edge of Korthak space. 350 ships from two species, united by friendship and driven by the need to rescue their captured families. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship, watching the final preparations for Operation Homecoming. Fleet Admiral Sam Wright commanded the massive force from the flagship UES Liberty. The older man had fought in humanity's civil wars decades ago, but he had never seen anything like this. Human warships flew alongside Villani crystal vessels, their crews working together as if they had been allies for centuries instead of months. "All ships report ready, Admiral," came the voice of Captain Roy Chen from his stealth ship. Chen's team had spent weeks scouting Korthak positions, finding the locations where prisoners were being held. Morrison looked at the data on his screen. 12 different research stations across 8 star systems. The Korthak had spread their prisoners thin, thinking it would make rescue impossible. They were about to learn they were wrong. Dr. Lisa Hayes worked frantically in the medical bay, preparing treatment stations for both human and Villani prisoners. The reports from Chen's scouts had been horrifying. The Korthak experiments were brutal, designed to find weaknesses in both species that could be turned into biological weapons. "How many do you think are still alive?" Amy Walsh asked quietly. She had been unusually silent during the journey, thinking about all the people they couldn't save from New Denver and Crystal Mere. "All of them," Morrison replied firmly. "We're bringing everyone home." Zethara stood near the navigation station, the crystal being's body glowing with determination. The Villani had never fought a war of liberation before, but they learned quickly. Their harmonic weapons had been modified to specifically target Korthak cybernetics, turning the enemy's greatest strength into their biggest weakness. Admiral Wright's voice came over the fleet communication system. "All ships, this is Liberty Actual. Today we keep a promise made between friends. Today we show the galaxy that attacking peaceful people has consequences. Today we bring our family home." The attack began with simultaneous strikes across 12 systems. Morrison's group headed for Research Station Omega-7, where intelligence suggested Kirethan and other important prisoners were being held. The young Villani scientist had become a symbol of everything they were fighting to protect. As they dropped out of faster-than-light travel, Morrison saw the Korthak research station hanging in space like a metal tumor. It was surrounded by defensive platforms and patrol ships, but the Korthak had made a crucial mistake. They had never faced enemies who worked together as perfectly as humans and Villani. "Zethara, begin the song," Morrison ordered. The Villani's harmonic weapons filled space with deadly music. The sound waves, invisible to human eyes but devastating to Korthak technology, swept across the enemy defenses. Cybernetic implants overloaded, weapon systems failed, and ships began drifting helplessly. Amy Walsh coordinated the technical assault, while Major Kate Sullivan led the boarding teams. Human Marines and Villani defenders moved through the station, like a perfect dance, each covering the other's weaknesses. Morrison found himself in the medical section where the Korthak had conducted their experiments. What he saw made his stomach turn. Humans and Villani in holding cells, weak and sick from months of testing. But they were alive, and that was what mattered. "Kirethan," Morrison called out as he saw the young Villani in one of the cells. The crystal being was dim and cracked but still conscious. Kirethan's song was weak but filled with joy. "I knew you would come," Hayes translated through her communicator. "I told the others that humans keep their promises." Dr. Hayes worked with both human and Villani medical teams to stabilize the prisoners. The Korthak experiments had been designed to find ways to control both species, but they had also revealed something else. Humans and Villani could share certain biological treatments, making both species stronger when they worked together. Reports came in from other assault teams across the galaxy. Station after station fell to the combined fleet. The Korthak had expected to face 2 separate species fighting independently. Instead, they faced a unified force that moved like a single organism, but the real test came at the Korthak homeworld of Regulus Prime. Warlord Grakthul had gathered the remainder of his fleet around the planet, preparing for a final battle. The massive space fortress above the planet held thousands of prisoners from dozens of species. Admiral Wright's fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. 300 ships arranged in a pattern that looked like 2 hands, reaching out to protect something precious. The Korthak fleet was larger, but they had never fought enemies who trusted each other completely. "This is Admiral Wright to Warlord Grakthul," came the broadcast across all frequencies. "Release your prisoners and surrender. This is your only warning." The Korthak response was immediate. Hundreds of ships moved to attack, their weapons charging for a battle that would decide the fate of multiple species. Morrison watched the space battle from his position near the planet's surface. The Villani crystal ships moved like schools of fish, perfectly coordinated and impossible to track. Their harmonic weapons turned the Korthak's cybernetic advantages into fatal weaknesses. Human warships provided heavy firepower and electronic warfare, jamming enemy communications and disrupting their battle formations. The battle was fierce but surprisingly short. The Korthak had built their empire on attacking species that fought alone. They had no experience against enemies who moved as one mind, who anticipated each other's actions, and who would die before abandoning their friends. Warlord Grakthol's flagship was the last to fall. Morrison led the boarding party that captured the Korthak leader. The gray-skinned alien was more machine than biological, with cybernetic implants covering most of his body. "You have won this battle," Grakthol said through his translator. "But there are other Korthak fleets, other worlds. We will return." Morrison looked at the defeated warlord and felt something unexpected. Not hatred, but pity. "No," he said quietly, "you won't." Instead of executing the Korthak leadership, Morrison made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. He offered them a choice. Join the galactic community as equals, learn to live without slavery and conquest, or face permanent isolation on their homeworld. "Why?" Grakthol asked, clearly confused. "We attacked your people. We enslaved your friends. By your own laws of war, you should destroy us." Morrison thought about Zethara's songs of peace, about the Villani's willingness to welcome strangers as friends, because that's what friends do. They teach each other to be better. The aftermath of the liberation took months to organize. Thousands of prisoners from dozens of species were freed from Korthak research facilities. Many had been enslaved for years, and they needed time to heal both physically and emotionally. Morrison found himself appointed as the first governor of Haven Prime, a former Korthak world that became the galaxy's first multi-species colony. Humans, Villani, and reformed Korthak worked together to build something new. Dr. Hayes established the Interspecies Medical Institute on Haven Prime, where the knowledge gained during the war was used to heal rather than harm. The biological research that the Korthak had intended as weapons became medical treatments that saved lives across multiple species. Amy Walsh led the engineering teams that developed new technologies nobody could have created alone. Human creativity combined with Villani harmony and Korthak mechanical precision produced innovations that seemed like magic. 6 months after the liberation, representatives from 47 different species gathered on Haven Prime for the signing of the Galactic Cooperation Accord. The document established principles for peaceful contact, mutual defense, and the protection of all intelligent life. Morrison stood with Zethara and Admiral Wright as the accord was signed. The Crystal Being's song had changed again, becoming something new. It was still peaceful but stronger now, carrying the memory of what they had fought for and what they had built together. "The galaxy is no longer a place where species stand alone," Admiral Wright said during the ceremony. "Today we establish a new law. Hurt our friends, and you face not just their defenders, but all of ours. Extend your hand in peace, and you will find it welcomed by many." Kirithan, fully healed and now serving as a bridge between species, added their own song to the ceremony. "We learned that friendship is not just sharing good times," Hayes translated. "It is standing together when times are hard. It is keeping promises when keeping them is difficult." Morrison looked out at the crowd gathered for the ceremony. Humans and Villani stood together, but they were joined by dozens of other species who had heard about the liberation. Former enemies had become allies. Former slaves had become free beings with their own voice in galactic affairs. The Korthak, representatives led by a reformed warrior named Thekmor, approached Morrison with a crystal sculpture made in the Villani style, but using Korthak engineering techniques. It was a symbol of what the galaxy could become when enemies chose to become friends. "We have learned much from defeat," Thekmor said. "We learned that strength comes not from conquest, but from cooperation. We ask to join this alliance not as conquerors but as students." Morrison accepted the gift and looked